She made me believe that I was worthless, but I proved that no one can erase who I am. I never thought I'd be able to tell this to someone without trembling, without feeling my chest tighten as if it were going to explode. But here I am, trying to put into words something I've carried for years, like a weight that makes me feel smaller than I really am. My name is Leonardo. I'm 17 years old, and I spent most of my adolescence trying to survive inside my home in the place that was supposed to be safe. I grew up believing my older sister Marina was perfect, popular, charming, intelligent, everything I could never be in my family's eyes. But her perfection came at a price only I paid: physical abuse, humiliation, psychological manipulation. For years I learned to hide, to smile when I needed to control every word and gesture so as not to provoke her hatred. And deep down, I felt guilty, as if everything was my fault, even though I knew I was wrong. I had no one to talk to, or I thought I didn't. My mother, Vanessa, was always busy maintaining the appearance of a perfect family. My father, Gustavo, seemed more concerned with his image than with the pain I carried. It was a suffocating cycle that consumed me from the inside, while from the outside I tried to be invisible. Every day was a silent battle. Every wrong move Marina made turned into an avalanche of insults, shoves, and looks that cut me to the core. I felt trapped, alone, afraid that no one would believe me. Everything changed the day Marina lost control completely. I'll never forget the morning I woke to a shrill scream coming from her room. I ran, even with my heart racing, and found Marina falling, her arm bleeding, her straightener broken on the floor. She screamed in pain, but I realized instantly that there was more to it than just an accident. Her look was unusual, a mix of anger, despair, and guilt. My reaction was mixed. I felt fear, rage, but also a strange sense of relief. Relief because, for the first time, her mask began to slip. For the first time, the world could see that what was happening between us was not normal, but the emotional turmoil was intense. I felt responsible for helping her, and at the same time wanted to run away, to disappear from that scene. When my mother came running in, screaming, I felt the truth about to explode. And it did. Everything came to light. Messages, reports of assault, everything recorded in the diaries and notes I'd secretly kept to remind myself that my life didn't have to be invisible. It was the turning point no one asked for, but one that needed to happen. In the days that followed, my life was turned upside down. Catherine, the detective, arrived on the scene, and the social workers Nicholas and Kathy began monitoring our every move. The feeling of invasion was overwhelming, but it was also the first time I felt like someone was truly listening to me. I remember my first sessions with Kathy, sitting in a chair that felt too small for my body, breathless, telling stories I'd never told anyone. Every detail made me tremble, memories of those hands pushing me, the cutting words, the feeling of helplessness while my parents looked on. On the outside, I still tried to maintain the appearance of a normal teenager, but inside, each session was a war between fear and relief. I cried, groaned, and felt my body ache with the accumulated tension of years. But there, in the office, for the first time, I realized there could be a different path, that I didn't have to accept what had always been happening, that I had the right to feel anger, to protect myself, to seek justice. Anger was constant. I found myself thinking about Marina, every moment she humiliated me, every shove, every insult, every emotional blackmail she used to maintain her image. It was impossible not to feel hatred, but also dangerous to let it dominate me. Catherine explained that it wasn't about revenge, but about rebuilding, learning to set boundaries, learning to trust again, learning to transform pain into strength. At first I didn't understand. I just wanted everything to go back to normal, for Marina to apologize, for my parents to look at me and finally see how much I suffered. But normal never existed. and life forced me to learn that the only person I could truly count on was myself. In basketball, I found an outlet. Every practice, every bounce, every shot was like releasing some of the anger, the frustration, the pain I'd accumulated. My body felt exhausted, but my mind cleared. I learned to use the strength I felt inside constructively, channeling energy instead of drowning in it. The first big decision I made was to tell the truth. It wasn't easy. Each word seemed to drag years of fear and shame back up, and I trembled, swallowed the lump in my throat, and felt my vision blur. But when I finally told my parents, something changed. Vanessa cried. Gustavo turned pale, but he was no longer indifferent. For the first time, I felt my pain was valid. I felt I no longer needed to keep quiet. Catherine and the social workers helped us set boundaries, documented the abuse, and ensured Marina received the necessary help and that I had protection. I still felt angry, still afraid, but I also felt something new, hope. For the first time, I realized my life could take a different direction, that I could finally begin to rebuild not only my body and mind, but also my trust in others and in myself. Over the next few months, my routine changed completely. I still lived at home, but now there were clear rules, boundaries, and constant supervision. Sometimes it felt suffocating having social workers and Catherine watching my every move, but I learned that this protection was necessary. Each morning I felt anxious before leaving for school, worried that Marina might try to manipulate something or that my parents would forget their promises. Memories of shoving and yelling surfaced, but I tried to use my breathing and focus on basketball to control the anxiety. My body still reacted, sweaty palms, rapid heartbeat, tense muscles, as if my past were always ready to attack me. But I realized something new. Each time I managed to control these signals, I felt stronger. I began writing down everything I felt, not as a diary, but as practical therapy. I detailed every difficult moment, every small victory, every physical sensation. And I realized that recording my life helped me externalize anger and fear, transforming them into learning. It was slow, painful, but effective. Little by little, my mind began to understand that I didn't have to carry all the weight alone. Basketball became more than a sport. It was a refuge, a space where I could be myself, without masks, without fear. Each practice was painful because my body still remembered the stress and strain of years of abuse. Stiff shoulders, a sore neck, a tense back. But it was also liberating. My teammates noticed my dedication, but no one knew what I was facing at home. This anonymity gave me the courage to focus and push myself beyond my limits. And it was in this space that I realized something important. I had value, even if Marina had led me to believe I didn't. Each ball that bounced on the court was like a firm step toward emotional freedom. My anger began to transform into motivation. I began dreaming of small goals, like improving my accuracy, gaining more stamina, and I felt I could apply the same focus to my personal life. The feeling of physical progress mixed with the emotional, creating a cycle of positive reinforcement I had never experienced before. My relationship with Marina remained complicated. She was in recovery and also attended therapy, but each appointment was a test. Sometimes I found myself exploding over small things, remembering past abuse. Other times, I felt pity for her, mixed with anger and disbelief. Catherine helped me understand that these feelings were normal and that forgiving didn't mean forgetting, but releasing the emotional burden. My mother, Vanessa, finally began to see that protecting her image didn't mean protecting her family. Every conversation with her was intense, tears, screams, silence, and then tight hugs that said more than words. My father also began to change slowly, realizing that neglect was costly and that love needed to be more than appearance. The process was slow and painful, but real. I began to realize that I no longer needed to be invisible within my own home. I began to feel worthy of respect and protection, and that I could set firm boundaries without fear. Therapy with Kathy was crucial. She helped me deal with guilt and shame, feelings I'd carried since childhood. The feeling of being weak, of not being worthy of being heard, was replaced by a gradual understanding. I was a victim, not a culprit. Each session was intense. I trembled, choked back tears, felt my heart race as I relived memories I'd tried to forget. But at the same time, something unlocked. I began to understand my emotional patterns, my automatic reactions, and how I could react differently in the present. I learned simple breathing, visualization, and physical grounding techniques that helped me manage anxiety and panic attacks. Each small victory in this process made my body relax. Shoulders less tense, breathing deeper, muscles less rigid. I still feared Marina at times, but no longer with the paralyzing dread I'd felt before. I realized that despite the trauma, I could choose my reactions and build a life that wasn't dominated by fear. My social life slowly began to expand. Tyler and Ashley, colleagues who had previously only known the silent, withdrawn version of me, became unexpected support. They listened to me, encouraged me, and showed me that empathy exists outside of home. Each encounter was an exercise in trust, allowing new people to see vulnerability without judgment. It was uncomfortable, but liberating. I began to realize that pain didn't need to be shared with everyone, but that finding allies was essential for emotional reconstruction. I felt less alone, more able to express myself without fear. I realized that my story could be told without shame, and that doing so didn't diminish who I was, but rather strengthened me. Small steps turned into big changes, and I began to believe that overcoming obstacles isn't instantaneous, but it is possible. One of the hardest parts was facing Marina without feeling absolute hatred. I still remembered the times she'd pushed me, humiliated me, or made cruel comments in front of friends and family. When we had our first sessions with Catherine and Kathy, my body reacted intensely, trembling hands, cold sweats, shallow breaths. Every word that came out of her mouth made me want to scream or run away, but I knew I had to face it. Each session was a test of my patience, empathy, and the emotional strength I'd been building. I realized that facing Marina was different from forgiving her. It wasn't about forgetting or minimizing what she'd done, but about regaining my power over my own emotions. Gradually, I began to be able to listen without collapsing. The anger was still there, but it no longer controlled me. I learned to observe my feelings as if they were waves. They came, crashed, and then receded. Over time, I realized that Marina also carried pain and fears that I'd never known how to deal with. But that didn't diminish my right to feel anger or demand respect. Physically, my body began to react differently. Basketball, once merely an outlet, also became a space for self-affirmation. Each practice required discipline and focus, but also provided moments of genuine joy, something I had almost forgotten. Feeling the ball bounce under my hands, hearing the sound of the court, the heavy breathing after a sprint, all of this reminded me that I was capable, that my body had strength, and that I could rely on it. At night, I felt sore. Muscles, tense shoulders, but also a good fatigue, which came not from anxiety or fear, but from conscious effort and a sense of achievement. I began to realize that physical pain could be different from emotional pain. One was a sign of life and resilience, the other of trauma to be processed. This distinction helped me understand that my pain didn't have to paralyze me, and that my body could be an ally in my emotional reconstruction. My social confidence was also constantly tested. Resuming, my conversations with friends or in support groups wasn't easy. At times, I stuttered, lost my words, felt heat rising in my face, and my body reacted as if under threat once again. But each conversation was a silent victory. I learned that telling my story honestly freed me from an immense burden. and that my vulnerability could be met with empathy and respect. Tyler and Ashley, among other colleagues, helped me realize that not all people are the same. Some distanced themselves, others reached out, but I learned to choose my battles and my allies. It was a daily exercise in assertiveness and authenticity, which taught me to say no without guilt and to recognize my emotional limits. Every small step forward was accompanied by setbacks. Sometimes Marina would provoke me or try to manipulate past situations to make me feel guilty. I felt my chest tighten, my throat closing, but now I had tools to cope. Catherine taught me breathing, focus, and self-affirmation techniques that could lessen the immediate impact. I began to realize that every time I resisted exploding or withdrawing completely, I was gaining emotional ground. The feeling was strange, a mix of frustration, pride, and exhaustion. But I realized that these internal battles were signs that I was alive, aware, and capable of protecting myself. I learned that overcoming doesn't mean not feeling pain, it means feeling it, acknowledging it, and moving forward. Rebuilding my relationship with my parents was also intense. Vanessa and Gustavo had to face their flaws, and I had to learn to trust again. Every conversation, every tense moment or sincere embrace was an emotional battle. I remembered the times I felt ignored, the yelling, the silent accusations. But over time, I saw that they were truly trying, not only for Marina, but for me. I began to realize that family isn't perfect, but it can be rebuilt with honesty, empathy, and mutual effort. Every gesture of care, every word of support made me feel less alone and more able to believe that the future could be different. One of the most defining moments of my recovery was realizing that I could put myself first without guilt. For years, I'd been taught that my needs were less important than maintaining peace or my family's image. But one afternoon at basketball practice, after an intense sprint, my body felt exhausted, but my mind clear. For the first time, I thought, I deserve this. I deserve to take care of myself. It was a simple, almost banal moment, but for me it was revolutionary. I began making small decisions that reflected my well-being, choosing who to spend time with, which activities truly felt good, how to express myself without fear of judgment. This autonomy, however small, was crucial in realizing that my life could be my own, no longer defined by fear or Marina's manipulation. There were still difficult days. I remember waking up one morning with a sense of panic, remembering an old episode, and feeling my chest untighten, my hands trembling, my legs wobbly. It was as if everything I had rebuilt crumbled in minutes. But instead of hiding, I used the tools I had learned: deep breathing, mindful thinking, and focusing on the present. I called Kathy, vented, and slowly the lump in my throat began to dissolve. I realized that asking for help is not a sign of weakness, but of courage. Each difficult day was an opportunity to practice resilience and strengthen my own emotional strength. I began to recognize myself as someone capable of facing trauma without being consumed by it, even though I still felt pain. My relationship with Marina, though still delicate, began to change in concrete ways. I realized that empathy didn't mean accepting abuse, but understanding that she also needed help. Some days she'd come with sincere apologies, other times she'd still test my limits. Each interaction required patience, assertiveness, and self-control. Catherine and Kathy closely monitored everything, helping to mediate conflicts and teach healthy communication techniques. I learned to speak up without fear, set clear boundaries, and protect my own mental health. It was exhausting, but also liberating to realize that I could interact with my sister in a controlled way, without my body and mind being dominated by fear or uncontrolled anger. Little by little, I began to see concrete results. My body, previously tense and full of automatic reactions to stress, was more relaxed. My sleep improved, my anxiety diminished, and I began to enjoy the little things. Eating a leisurely breakfast, listening to music, playing basketball with friends, laughing without guilt. Each physical and emotional achievement reminded me that I was capable of rebuilding my life, even if the past had left deep scars. I felt proud of myself, something I had never truly experienced before. This sense of continuous progress, albeit slow, gave me daily motivation to keep fighting, even on the darkest days. Significant victory was realizing I could trust people outside my family again. Conversations with friends, colleagues, and even coaches showed me that not everyone wants to hurt or manipulate me. I learned to recognize signs of trust and gradually open up. The feeling of being heard and valued by someone who truly cares was incredible. My words carried weight. My experiences were respected. I realized I didn't have to carry the pain alone, and that sharing could strengthen, not weaken, my journey of overcoming. This learning gave me the courage to face other life challenges with greater resilience and self-confidence. Gradually, I realized that true transformation wasn't just in what was happening outside of me, but in what I felt inside. Every tear I shed in therapy, every difficult word I said to my parents or Marina, every basketball practice that left me exhausted, contributed to a silent yet profound process. I began to realize that constant fear, insecurity, and guilt could be replaced with confidence, self-care, and assertiveness. This change didn't happen overnight. It was slow, painful, and full of stumbles, but each step brought me closer to who I wanted to be. I began to look in the mirror and see someone who survived, who endured, and who was finally ready to live without being defined by the trauma of the past. My relationship with my parents changed significantly. Vanessa and Gustavo began to listen more, to validate my feelings, to realize that protecting their image couldn't trump caring for their children. I learned to demand my emotional space and recognize genuine efforts. Every gesture of attention from them, every sincere hug, was like a reminder that family could be rebuilt even after so much pain. There were still conflicts, difficult days, but now there was dialogue and honesty. I realized that being heard and respected was the foundation of any healthy relationship, and that my worth didn't depend on the opinions of others, but on the respect I gave myself. With Marina, there are still challenges. Sometimes old resentments surface, and I feel anger, sadness, or frustration, but I can handle these emotions without being overwhelmed by them. I've learned to set clear boundaries and maintain my peace even when she tries to provoke me. I've realized that overcoming doesn't mean forgetting or erasing what happened, but choosing how to react and which bonds are worth maintaining. Today, I can see her as someone in the process of recovery without it diminishing my own strength. This awareness gives me emotional freedom and allows me to focus on my life, my dreams, and my own happiness. Today, at 17, I feel stronger and more aware. My body, mind, and emotions are in sync, and each small daily achievement reminds me that trauma doesn't define who I am. Basketball remains my refuge, but it's also a symbol of my resilience. I know I still carry scars, painful memories, and moments of insecurity, but I've learned to transform all of this into motivation to grow. Each step, each achievement, each challenge overcome reinforces the certainty that it's possible to rebuild your life, even after years of pain and abuse. If I could leave a message for anyone going through something similar, it would be simple. Pain doesn't have to define your life. It's not easy, it's not quick, but it is possible to get back on your feet, rebuild your self-esteem, set boundaries, and find true support. The journey is unique for each person, full of ups and downs, but every effort is worth it. Today, I'm proud of who I've become and the courage I've found within myself. I know I still have a lot to learn and overcome, but for the first time, I feel capable of living fully, without fear, guilt, and with hope. Believe me, it is possible to bounce back even when all seems lost.